being from the Wall Street Journal. I know you said you don't want to talk about Bucharest, so I'm going to try and encourage you to talk about Bucharest.
Please do.
You have, I think, 3 proposed new members to admit from the Balkans, and there's a talk of perhaps giving MAP to Ukraine and to Georgia. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen there, but at the moment it looks rather difficult for MAP, and it looks rather difficult for Macedonia. Would that? What is your expectation of what will happen, and would it be a problem, do you think, for NATO if Macedonia can't join and there is no MAP?
Let me start by answering you that as you and I know, at least I know, that 13 or 14 working days are a long time in politics. And we are about 13 or 14 working days away from the Bucharest summit, and I can assure you that both as far as Ukraine and Georgia's MAP aspirations are concerned, as well as on the name issue, if I may qualify it this way, where NATO, by the way, has no direct role to play. Let's also underline that fact. There's no direct role for NATO or its Secretary General on the name issue. But I know that a lot of activity is going on also on the name issue. I do hope that the summit will show results in this regard. I've tried in my speech at least to underline NATO's open door. I've spoken about the unfinished business in Europe. We are discussing the MAP request from Ukraine and Georgia. As you know, we haven't finished that discussion yet. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to say that the sun is shining, and I know already now what the outcome will be. The outcome, I hope, would be, or should be, perspective. The outcome should be perspective for, hopefully, the 3 Western Balkan nations who are knocking on NATO's door. Perspective for Bosnia-Herzegovina and Montenegro, because we should look at the Balkans from a regional perspective. And let me add very quickly, perspective for Serbia as well. So I do hope that we'll see invitations in Bucharest to speak about the Balkans first. I do hope that we see a qualitative in strengthening, I should say, in our relationship with Montenegro and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I do hope that a strong signal will be sent, despite the discussion going on in Serbia at the moment, that, in our opinion, the future of Serbia lies in Euro-Atlantic integration and not in sullen nationalism. And the Serbs will finally decide themselves in the elections what course they want to follow. I can only say that I strongly hope, because this is Europe, I strongly hope that this will be the outcome of the Bucharest summit. But I use the word hope. I cannot say what the outcome will be. NATO is an alliance of 26 sovereign democracies, and I can tell you that keeping the flock together is not always easy. On Ukraine and Georgia, I also hope, I can start from the same basic line. I also hope that they will see the result of Bucharest as an inspiration for them to proceed on their Euro-Atlantic track. In what form that exactly will be, it is honestly quite early to tell, and I hope that the few working days left will provide a more clear answer than I can give you here and now.
Thank you, Secretary General. You know, I always ask benign questions. When Craig introduced you, he mentioned that you are just back from Kosovo. Could you perhaps dwell on the issue and describe your assessment of the mess down there?
I was going to say my assessment might not necessarily coincide with yours. As you and I know, have known for a long time already. But I was there yesterday indeed, and let me give you my assessment. Let me start by saying that as a NATO Secretary General, speaking on behalf of NATO, I'll hesitate because otherwise I'll hear it from you sooner rather than later, that I'll speak on behalf of the United Nations or any other international organizations, let alone on behalf of a P5 member. I must tell you that as far as NATO is concerned and KFOR is concerned, the role and the responsibility is crystal clear. KFOR is there on the basis of Security Council Resolution 1244. And when I say there, Mr. Ambassador, I mean all over Kosovo. All over Kosovo. And KFOR will not be denied by anyone from that responsibility. Second point, I experienced again yesterday that KFOR does have the trust and confidence of all Kosovo citizens. I went to a Serb enclave and I spoke at length with people who have not an easy life, as you know. They don't have an easy life. But they did tell me that it was also for them of extreme importance that KFOR plays its role there. My third remark would be that NATO is not, Ambassador, in the recognition business. And you know the situation, and we should not beat around the bush either here. But I would definitely disagree with you if you describe the situation in Kosovo as a mess. And if, let me take your terminology, but only for the sake of argument, if there are messy situations from time to time, who are creating those messy situations? Who are running into a courthouse in North Mitrovica? And who are making, I think, a basic mistake and are not looking after their own interests very well. So, indeed, I do hope that every organization will play its role. The UN will play its role. The European Union will play its role. Let me speak on behalf of NATO to assure you, Ambassador, that KFOR, 16,000 strong, will continue to play its role on the basis of 1244, unless the Security Council decides otherwise. And you know, Ambassador, much better than I do, what is necessary for the Security Council to agree.
Last question, over here. Mr. Secretary General, a question which surely goes beyond Bucharest. Would you please lose some words on the future of NATO-Russian relations and on NATO's outreach to Asia?
On NATO-Russia. There's only one key word I see in this relationship, and that is engagement, with a capital E. It is my strong conviction that this is a very important relationship. I even go one step further. I think NATO cannot do without Russia, and as Russia cannot do without NATO. So I attach great importance to this relationship, and I attach also great importance to the acceptance by President Putin of the invitation to come to Bucharest. It will be the first time in the history of the NATO-Russia Council and NATO-Russia cooperation that we'll have a NATO-Russia Council at the heads of state and government level. And we are busy preparing for that. If I say engagement, that does also mean that we also discuss in all openness and transparency the issues on which we disagree. We should discuss Kosovo. We should discuss missile defense. We should discuss the future of the CFE treaty. We should discuss NATO enlargement, or expansion, as our Russian friends like to qualify. We should do that. Because even if you and I could say that in Moscow the perception is the wrong perception, that NATO enlargement is threatening, I think it's the wrong perception. I always quote President Ilves of Estonia. I do not know how more democracy, more rule of law, more respect for human rights can ever be a threat to any nation in this world. But if that is the perception in Moscow, even if we think it's wrong, we should discuss that perception. And that is what we do in the NATO-Russia Council. Back to Bucharest, I do hope that in a practical sense, and we have lots of areas in which we are cooperating very well operationally, practically. I hope that, for instance, Afghanistan might be an area, and might be a UN-mandated NATO operation, where NATO and Russia, I think, can make strides to cooperate closely together in fighting narcotics, in perhaps elements of logistical support by Russia for the NATO operation. We have this very successful project of training Afghan and Central Asian personnel in the fight against narcotics, in increasing our interoperability, on initiatives on cooperative air pictures. So we have a range of issues. There are also some issues which NATO cannot directly. We can discuss it, but we cannot directly solve it. And I'm glad to hear that on contentious and difficult issues, there is also still a chance for a Russian-American continuation of discussions on important issues like missile defense. But let me conclude that for me the word engagement is key. That does not mean that of course red lines drawn by others can ever be accepted by NATO. NATO decides itself on its enlargement. There are no vetoes or droit de regard. But I think we still have many areas in which the Russian Federation and NATO can work very well together. And again, I'm looking forward to a constructive and interesting NATO-Russia Council in Bucharest.
Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you in Bucharest in a few weeks. Thank you. Now, if everybody could just stay seated, we're going to get set up for our next session. There's going to be some spare seats down here in the front if people want to take them. Come on down.